The bus rumbled away, leaving Grace standing at the foot of a sprawling iron gate that seemed more like a barrier between two worlds than a simple entrance. The sign beside it read, Anderson Estate Private Property. Beyond the gate, she could see the faint outline of a palatial home rising above the trees, its glass walls gleaming even in the overcast Lagos morning. Her palms grew clammy around the worn canvas bag she clutched, holding nothing but a notebook, her sister Mia's tuition bill, and a folded letter of employment. This job was supposed to be her chance. If she kept it long enough, Mia's future was secure. That thought alone pushed Grace forward when her heart wanted to retreat. The gatekeeper pressed a button, and the gate slid open with a slow, mechanical hum. She stepped onto the gravel path, each stone crunching under her borrowed shoes. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined the way, dotted with imported roses so flawless they looked artificial. The silence was suffocating, so unlike the noisy bustle of the small Lecky apartment she shared with Mia. Here the air felt heavy, as though laughter itself had been banned. The front door opened before she could knock. A middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp, assessing eyes looked her over from head to toe. Grace Ocon? Yes, ma'am. I'm Mrs. Patel, head housekeeper. On time. Good. Come in. Inside, the marble floor shone like a mirror, reflecting Grace's nervous expression back at her. Large abstract paintings hung along the walls, bold streaks of red and black that felt aggressive rather than comforting. There were no family photographs, no framed memories, not even a sign that people actually lived here. Mrs. Patel handed her a leather-bound handbook. Read, memorize, follow the rules exactly. No wandering to the second floor after 9 p.m. Do not open the music room without permission. When Mr. Anderson is home, remain silent. Answer briefly. Do not stare. Do not ask personal questions. Grace swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady. Yes, ma'am. She nearly blurted out a joke. Something about adding, don't breathe too loud to the rulebook, but bit her tongue. She couldn't afford mistakes. The kitchen smelled of melting butter, warm and inviting compared to the icy hall. Marcus, the chef, a burly man with a permanent scowl, slid trays of bread from the oven. When he spotted Grace, he gave a crooked smile. New girl, welcome to the Ice Palace. Marcus, Mrs. Patel warned. Kidding. Mostly, he muttered, handing Grace a small roll when Mrs. Patel turned her head. She tucked it into her apron with a quiet, thank you. By mid-morning, Grace was polishing glass tables in the cavernous living room. She caught sight of her reflection in the glossy surfaces, hair tied too quickly, apron too loose, hands trembling as she worked. Every few minutes, she whispered reminders under her breath. Don't spill, don't trip, don't mess this up. At 10 o'clock sharp, the atmosphere changed. The intercom chimed. Mrs. Patel's voice carried through the corridors. The master is home early. Everyone, positions. The staff moved like a silent drill team, disappearing into side corridors. Grace froze when Mrs. Patel thrust a tray into her hands. On it, a glass of mineral water with 2 lemon slices. Stand here. When he pauses, offer it. Don't look him in the eye for too long. Grace's pulse quickened. She had read about him, Emmanuel Anderson, 32, billionaire investor, ruthless in boardrooms, rarely seen in society pages. His wealth was legendary, his reputation colder still. The sound of footsteps on marble echoed like a metronome. He entered the hall with an effortless stride, tall, broad-shouldered, his fitted navy suit and silver watch gleaming under the lights. His assistant followed, rattling off a schedule in monotone. Emmanuel didn't look up from his phone. He didn't need to. He seemed to command the room simply by existing in it. Mrs. Patel gave Grace a sharp nod, her cue. Heart pounding, Grace stepped forward, both hands clutching the tray. Sir, your water. But fate had other plans. The robot vacuum, a glossy, disc-shaped machine that scuttled about like a pet, suddenly veered in front of her. Grace jerked back, her heel catching the edge of the rug. The tray tilted, time slowed as the glass wobbled, then toppled, spilling ice-cold water across Emmanuel's polished leather shoes. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the vacuum seemed to stop mid-beep, as though it too realized disaster had struck. Grace dropped to her knees instantly, snatching the towel from the tray. "I'm so sorry, sir. Please, I can fix this. I'll polish them, or pay for new ones. Well, I can't afford new ones, but I can clean them." Her words tumbled out like marbles rolling across marble. She dabbed frantically at his shoes, cheeks burning with humiliation. "First day, first mistake, you're done." Then she heard his voice, deep, controlled, not raised but firm enough to still her hands in mid-motion. "Stand up." Grace froze. She looked up and met his eyes for the first time, steel gray, sharp as a blade. Yet what struck her most wasn't the coldness. It was the exhaustion lurking behind it, the kind that comes from being forged too long under pressure. She scrambled to her feet, nearly bumping into his chest before stumbling back. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, biting her lip. "At least your shoes got moisturized. Dry leather cracks." Sadly. Mrs. Patel coughed, almost hiding a laugh. Marcus ducked into the kitchen, shoulders shaking. Even the assistant blinked, stunned. For a moment, Emmanuel simply stared at her. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, though quickly suppressed. "No need to pay for the shoes," he said evenly. "And next time, keep your stories straight." My stories? I meant the leather moisturizing." "Don't make things up." Her jaw dropped. Was that a joke? Before she could recover, he turned to Mrs. Patel. "Change the shoes. Wipe the floor. Miss Ocon, don't run indoors, and don't let the robot lead you." With that, he strode away, resuming the assistant's report as though nothing had happened. The living room seemed to exhale all at once. Marcus emerged, slipping a buttered roll into Grace's hand. "Survived, rookie." Mrs. Patel knelt to wipe the floor, her eyes flicking toward Grace. "You spilled water on his shoes and you're still standing." "Impressive." Grace sagged against the wall, clutching the tray. Her heart was still racing, but deep inside something unexpected flickered. He hadn't fired her. He hadn't even shouted. As she bent to pick up the fallen lemon slice, she caught sight of the robot vacuum again, its stickered eyes blinking as it beeped. She whispered, "Don't tease people anymore, okay?" The machine rolled off obediently, leaving a spotless shine behind. That night, as Grace settled into the small staff lounge, she placed a broken hydrangea bloom in a paper cup, adding water to keep it alive. It wasn't much, a splash of color in a mansion that felt like ice. She texted Mia, "First day survived, haven't been fired. I'll be home Sunday with noodles." The reply came instantly, a red heart emoji. Grace smiled, shoulders easing. "Anim." Somewhere upstairs, faint piano notes drifted. Just a few keys struck before falling silent. Grace tilted her head toward the sound. No one else seemed to notice. But to her, it was proof. This house wasn't entirely lifeless. Not yet. And maybe, just maybe, she could be the one to bring warmth into it. The following day dawned bright over Lagos, sunlight spilling across Ikoyi's tree-lined avenues. Within the Anderson estate, however, the air remained as cold and ordered as always. Grace was already up before the staff bell rang, polishing the long stair rails until they gleamed. Every corridor felt endless, every painting stern. She kept whispering to herself, "Don't spill, don't trip, don't draw attention." But the house was so quiet that her own breathing seemed loud. When she passed through the kitchen, Marcus the chef gave her a knowing look. "Careful today, rookie. The master likes his meals timed to the minute." Grace nodded quickly, though she knew she wasn't assigned to cooking. Her job was to replace flowers, sweep, and keep invisible. Still, when Marcus rushed out mid-morning after a frantic call about his sick daughter, Mrs. Patel turned to her. "Ocon, watch the kitchen. All you need to do is reheat the vegetable soup for lunch. Nothing more. Do not experiment." Grace froze. Cooking for a billionaire was leagues beyond boiling noodles for Mia, but she straightened her apron and answered, "Yes, ma'am." The copper soup pot was already on the stove, filled with a rich, fragrant broth. She lit the burner carefully and tried to keep busy wiping counters, but as she moved, the scent of burning began to rise. Her eyes widened. She'd left the flame too high. Steam billowed, thick and smoky, curling through the pristine kitchen. Oh no, she gasped, fumbling to turn it off. White smoke puffed upward, setting her coughing violently. She flapped her hands uselessly, as if that could chase the smoke away. It was at that moment that Emmanuel Anderson walked into the room. The man was a vision of order. Charcoal trousers, crisp shirt, no tie today, but every button aligned. His steps halted when he entered the haze-filled kitchen. His gray eyes narrowed. "What," he said slowly, "is going on here?" Grace froze, clutching the pot lid. Her cheeks flamed. It's not what it looks like, sir." He raised a brow. "It looks like my lunch is burning." Panic scrambled her brain. Before she could stop herself, words tumbled out. "It's not burned. It's therapeutic steam soup. For health." Silence. The assistant who had followed him nearly dropped his tablet. Mrs. Patel at the doorway coughed sharply to hide a laugh. Emmanuel's gaze sharpened. "Therapeutic? What?" Grace nodded furiously, waving the lid like a fan. "Yes, instead of eating it, you inhale the steam. It detoxes the lungs. Very modern, very fashionable in, wellness circles." For a beat, the entire kitchen went still. Then, against all expectation, Emmanuel's lips twitched. A short, almost reluctant laugh escaped him. It wasn't polite or rehearsed, it was sudden, genuine, like something long buried had cracked open. "Steam soup?" he repeated, shaking his head. "That's a new one." Grace blinked, her embarrassment giving way to astonishment. She had made the untouchable billionaire laugh. Her heart flipped strangely in her chest. At that moment, Marcus returned, bursting in breathless. He stopped, sniffed the air, and then looked at the smoky pot. Grace braced for his wrath, but instead he doubled over, roaring with laughter. "Therapeutic steam soup? Oh Lord, I've been a chef 20 years and never heard of that dish." The whole kitchen erupted. Even Mrs. Patel, usually stone-faced, pressed a hand to her lips, her shoulders shaking. Grace felt her face go crimson, but she couldn't help smiling too. Emmanuel, though he quickly straightened, still had a trace of amusement in his eyes. For the first time, the coal mask had slipped, revealing something startlingly human beneath. Lunch was salvaged. Marcus, once he stopped laughing, whipped up a replacement dish. Grace was shooed back to flower duty, but the strange moment lingered. She caught herself humming as she arranged fresh lilies in the study. That evening, she carried a vase into Emmanuel's office. The room was as immaculate as the rest of the house. Shelves of leather-bound books, a desk piled with files stacked with military precision. Emmanuel sat there, tie loosened now, sleeves rolled up. His eyes remained fixed on his screen, scrolling through numbers and contracts. Grace set the vase quietly on a side table, but curiosity tugged at her. She glanced at the monitor as she turned away. His entire day was blocked in neat red slots. Wake at 6, exercise, eat, video call, meeting, report, more meetings until midnight. No dinners with family, no evenings with friends, not even time marked for rest. Only work. Her chest tightened. She remembered the tired slump of his shoulders in the kitchen earlier, the faint laugh that had surprised everyone. And she wondered, was this all his life had been reduced to? Contracts and silence. That night, long after the house had gone still, Grace stirred awake in the staff lounge. A faint glow spilled from under the study door. She crept closer, curiosity gnawing. Through a narrow crack, she saw him. Emmanuel at him like walls. A cold cup of coffee sat forgotten. He rubbed his temples, eyes shadowed, fatigue etched deep across his face. In that moment, he looked less like the invincible billionaire and more like a man trapped in a cage of his own making. Grace's heart tugged painfully. She thought of Mia, her sister, whose laughter could light up even the darkest days. Here, in this mansion of glass and marble, there was no such light. She wanted to step in, to place a flower or even just whisper a joke, but she knew her place. Quietly, she slipped back to her room. Still, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling, she realized the truth. The richest man in Lagos might also be the loneliest. The next morning, she carried a small blue hydrangea into the staff lounge, placing it in a chipped paper cup. Marcus paused to admire it, shaking his head. "You're strange, rookie, but this house feels less like a freezer with that around." Grace only smiled, but in her chest grew a quiet resolve. Maybe she couldn't fix everything, but she could at least try to bring warmth to the Anderson mansion, one flower, one clumsy smile at a time. Later that afternoon, she passed Emmanuel in the living room. He was seated on the long sofa, his tall frame slouched ever so slightly, gazing out at the garden. No phone, no files, just silence. Grace hesitated, then placed a vase of fresh roses on the coffee table. "Good night, sir," she murmured. He didn't reply, but she caught it, the way his eyes lingered on the petals, just for a moment longer than necessary. For Grace, that was enough. And for Emmanuel Anderson, though he would never admit it, the sound of her clumsy voice and the sight of her small, stubborn flowers were the first cracks of warmth seeping into a life long encased in glass and steel. The skies over Ikoyi darkened faster than usual, the sunset swallowed by rolling gray clouds. By evening, thunder cracked over the lagoon, and rain lashed against the tall glass windows of the Anderson estate. Grace was in the kitchen folding towels when the first power cut struck. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. The house plunged into darkness. Grace froze. The sound of the storm was deafening, the rattle of rain on glass, the boom of thunder shaking the walls. She tried to steady her breath, but panic clawed at her chest. Storms always dragged her back to that childhood memory she could never erase, the day her mother died, when a careless neighbor had locked her in a storeroom. Hours of blackness, thunder pounding above, rats scratching near her feet. Even as an adult, the dark still carried the weight of abandonment. Her knees gave way, and she slid against the kitchen wall, curling into herself, hands over her ears. A crash rang out. She had knocked a vase from the counter, shards scattered across the tiles. Her breath came ragged, uneven. Not again. Not the dark. Please, not the dark. Then light. A soft glow flickered through the corridor. Emanuel appeared, holding a candle in one hand, its golden flame haloing his face. His tall figure cut a sharp outline against the blackness, but the glow softened his edges. He stopped when he saw her crouched on the floor. "Miller," he said, his voice low, even. Grace looked up, blinking against the sudden light. Tears glistened in her eyes. I'm sorry, I broke the vase. Her words cracked like the storm outside. He set the candle on the windowsill and crouched beside her, his expression unreadable. "You're afraid of the dark." She bit her lip and nodded, ashamed. "Since I was little. After my mom died, I got trapped in a storeroom during a storm. I thought no one would ever come for me. That fear, it's never gone." For a long moment, Emmanuel was silent. Then he leaned back against the wall, the candlelight stretching shadows across his features. "I understand," he said finally, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "At the orphanage, every night was dark. No stories, no lullabies. Just silence, rain dripping through broken windows. I used to think if I disappeared, no one would notice." Grace turned to him, startled. This was the first time he had ever spoken of his past. His usual armor of steel-gray detachment seemed to falter in the glow of the candle. For a moment, she didn't see the billionaire everyone feared in Lagos boardrooms. She saw the lonely boy he once had been. "Maybe darkness is just a reminder," she whispered, her voice trembling, "that everyone needs a light beside them." Another thunderclap split the air. Grace flinched, instinctively clutching his sleeve. She pulled back immediately. "I'm sorry." But Emmanuel didn't push her away. Instead, his large hand gently covered hers, steadying her. "No one here gets left behind," he murmured. "You won't either." Her heart fluttered. She realized that beneath the layers of wealth and control, Emmanuel Anderson was reaching for something too, an anchor against his own storms. The power returned a moment later, harsh white light flooding the kitchen. Emmanuel stood, offering her his hand. Grace hesitated, then slid her smaller hand into his. He pulled her up with quiet strength, not letting go until she was steady. "Thank you," she whispered. He only nodded, his eyes unreadable again, but the moment lingered like the fading glow of the candle. The next morning, Grace was polishing the study shelves when a crash rang out. She hurried to the doorway and froze. Emmanuel was on one knee beside a toppled stack of heavy documents, his white shirt skewed, 2 buttons undone, his left hand pressed against his shoulder. A sharp scar ran jagged across his skin, and worse, a fresh tear had reopened it, crimson staining the white fabric. "Sir," Grace dropped to her knees beside him. "You're bleeding. Let me call a doctor." "No need." His jaw clenched, his gray eyes flashing irritation. "I'm fine." But Grace saw the blood dripping onto the polished floor, dark against the wood. "That's not fine." She bolted to the cabinet, grabbed the first aid kit, and returned within seconds. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. "Stay still, please." He grimaced as she tore open the gauze. "It's unnecessary." She met his gaze, her eyes soft but firm. "It's bleeding, not private. You can scold me later, but right now, let me help." Something in her tone silenced him. He turned his face away, allowing her to press the gauze to his shoulder. The scent of antiseptic filled the air. Grace worked carefully, her fingers brushing his skin as she cleaned the wound. His muscles tensed, but he didn't pull back. "Breathe slowly," she whispered, more to calm herself than him. "Inhale, exhale." For the first time, Emmanuel obeyed. The rhythm steadied them both. When she finished wrapping the bandage, she tied it gently, avoiding pressure on the scar beneath. "All done," she said softly. "It's not deep, but I'll change the dressing tomorrow." Emmanuel's hand lingered on the edge of the gauze. His voice was rough. "You don't need to care like this." Grace looked at him, her eyes unwavering. "Everyone has wounds. The real question is whether you'll let someone else bandage them." His gray eyes flickered, a ripple crossing their usual stillness. For a heartbeat, it was as if she had touched the deepest part of him, the boy who had never been bandaged, only hardened by life's blows. Later that day, Grace carried flowers toward the garage. She stopped abruptly when she saw Emmanuel standing by a sleek black car, signing papers with a logistics officer. Several boxes were being loaded into a van, school supplies, blankets, infant formula, all labeled for Hope Haven Orphanage. Grace's breath caught. She stepped back quickly, hoping not to be seen. But the image burned into her mind. This cold, unyielding man quietly sending warmth to children he didn't even know. He wasn't showing it to the press. He wasn't boasting. It was a secret act of generosity. That evening, she placed a small potted flower outside the study with a handwritten note. "Every house needs a bit of color, not to show off, but to remind us someone is always waiting for us to come home." She didn't sign it, but the next morning she noticed the flower had been moved inside the study, placed neatly on a shelf. The note was gone. And though Emmanuel said nothing, Grace caught him glancing at that little pot later that night, his expression unreadable, yet softer somehow. For the first time, Grace felt that the Anderson mansion, with its glass and marble, wasn't entirely frozen. Beneath the cold facade of Emmanuel Anderson, there were cracks, wounds, scars, and secrets that whispered of the lonely boy who once believed no one would come for him in the dark. And she promised herself quietly, "If no one else will bring warmth into his life, I will." Birthdays at the Anderson estate were not grand galas with champagne fountains or Lagos socialites swarming the halls. Instead, once a year, Emmanuel Anderson broke his rigid solitude to share a simple meal with the staff. Grace learned this from Marcus, who seemed almost amused at her disbelief. "A billionaire who doesn't throw a party at Eco Hotel," Marcus said with a smirk, "but eats roast chicken with his cooks and cleaners? That's Emmanuel for you." Grace had never imagined men like him celebrating birthdays at all. For her, birthdays had always meant a small cake bought with borrowed naira, one candle stuck in the center, and Mia's loud singing to make the day feel bigger. She couldn't picture Emmanuel, cold, polished, untouchable, allowing something so ordinary. The banquet hall was arranged simply that evening: a long table, plates of chicken and pumpkin soup, salad, and a modest frosted cake. Staff whispered as they settled in, buzzing with the rare chance to eat alongside their elusive employer. When Emmanuel entered in a minimalist dark suit, the room hushed. His expression remained composed, but as everyone chorused, "Happy birthday, sir," he faltered for a split second before nodding. A polite, faint smile touched his lips. Grace noticed immediately it never reached his eyes. One by one, the staff offered gifts. Mrs. Patel presented a vintage fountain pen, Marcus a bottle of rare wine, the driver a collectible pocket watch. Each gift was elegant, expensive, expected. Grace's hands shook beneath the table. Wrapped in old newspaper inside her bag was her own gift, a clumsy drawing she had sketched with colored pencils Mia had once used for school. A red-roofed house, light glowing in the windows, children laughing outside, a tall man vaguely resembling Emmanuel standing on the porch. When her turn came, Grace rose, cheeks burning. I have a gift too." The table fell silent, a maid offering a personal gift to a billionaire. Every gaze turned toward her, skeptical. Emmanuel's gray eyes fixed on her, cool and assessing. "Miss Oaken." Grace set the little package on the table with trembling fingers. "I didn't have money for anything fancy. I made this myself." He unwrapped it slowly. The room tilted with tension as the sketch came into view. Lines clumsy, colors uneven. But the house glowed with warmth. A flower pot by the porch, a curled-up cat, laughter almost visible between the pencil strokes. Marcus slapped a hand over his mouth to stifle a laugh. Drawing?" he whispered. Grace's panic bubbled out in words. "I'm sorry if it's ugly. Nobody would buy it, so it's one of a kind. If you don't like it, I can add a pool or a garage full of supercars. But I thought," her voice cracked, "a house with laughter is more luxurious than any of that." A ripple of chuckles softened the tension. Mrs. Patel sighed, shaking her head, but her eyes held the faintest warmth. Emmanuel, however, didn't laugh. He stared at the sketch for a long, unnerving silence. Grace's stomach knotted. "He'll think I'm ridiculous." Finally, his voice broke the quiet, low but steady. "Thank you, Miss Oaken. This is the most meaningful gift I've ever received." The room stilled. Then applause erupted, staff smiling, clapping, even Marcus chuckling with relief. Grace's face flushed crimson. She muttered under her breath, "Meaningful because it's the ugliest, right?" Marcus nearly choked on his soup. But Emmanuel only kept looking at the picture, his expression unreadable, yet softer than she had ever seen it. For years, birthdays had been nothing more than another entry in his calendar. Now someone had dared to give him, not luxury, but home. The following day, Grace was in the staff lounge when her phone buzzed nonstop. She frowned at the notifications, then froze. A photo was plastered across half a dozen Lagos blogs and tabloid sites. Emmanuel Anderson, the icy billionaire, holding a crude drawing with an uncharacteristic smile tugging at his lips. The headline screamed, "Cold Anderson softened by his maid." Her heart dropped. Messages from acquaintances flooded in. "She's definitely a gold digger. Knows how to get attention. He'll get bored of her in a week." Each word clawed at her chest. That night, she accompanied the staff to a 5-star hotel in Victoria Island for an investor gala. Emmanuel was scheduled to make an appearance. Grace kept her head down, arranging flowers, serving drinks, determined to stay invisible. But she wasn't invisible enough. Helena Voss, head of a powerful investment group, swept across the marble floor in an emerald gown. Pearls glimmered at her throat, her smile as sharp as a knife. She stopped directly in front of Grace, eyes flicking over her uniform with disdain. "So," Helena drawled loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "this is Anderson's new muse, a maid daring to step into this world. Bold indeed." Grace flushed crimson. I'm only doing my job. Helena leaned closer, voice dripping with venom. Don't think a childish sketch can tie down a man like Emmanuel. Men like him, they amuse themselves for a while. Then they toss girls like you aside. Snickers rippled among the surrounding crowd. Grace's throat tightened. She wanted to disappear. And then a voice sliced through the murmur. Helena. The crowd shifted as Emmanuel strode forward, tall and commanding, his gray eyes glinting like steel. I believe you've gone too far. Helena's smile faltered. I only spoke the truth. Surely you don't waste your energy defending a mere maid. The air turned electric. Emmanuel's voice cut through like a blade. She is not a mere maid. Grace Oaken is someone I respect. Anyone who insults her insults me. Gasps rippled through the hall. The business elite were accustomed to Anderson's ruthless detachment, never his defense of another person. This was a man who had cut down competitors with silence, who never acknowledged rumors. And yet here he was, declaring respect for a maid before Lagos's most powerful. Helena faltered, lips pressed into a brittle smile. As you wish. She turned away, heels clicking sharply, leaving whispers in her wake. Grace stood frozen, her ears ringing, his words replayed in her head. Someone I respect. But along with the joy blooming in her chest came a sharper fear. Camera flashes had gone off, journalists scribbling furiously. By morning, headlines would explode, and Emmanuel's empire would not be untouched. On the ride back to Ikoyi, the car was heavy with silence. Emmanuel stared out the window, jaw tight. Grace sat in the back seat, twisting the hem of her blouse. He had defended her, but at what cost? That night, lying on her narrow bed in the staff quarters, she stared at the ceiling, Helena's words echoing in her mind. You'll be tossed aside. Her phone still buzzed with cruel messages, and she imagined the damage this scandal could cause Emmanuel. Tears spilled hot and fast. She grabbed a sheet of paper and wrote a short letter in trembling handwriting. I don't want to cause the master any more problems. Please accept my resignation. She folded it neatly, sliding it into her bag. Tomorrow she would leave it on Mrs. Patel's desk and disappear before sunrise. Her gaze drifted to the living room downstairs, where her childish sketch now hung framed on the wall, colors glowing faintly in the lamplight. Goodbye, Emmanuel, she whispered into the dark. And with that, Grace made up her mind to leave the only place where she had ever begun to feel at home. The dawn broke softly over Ikoyi, the pale orange light slipping between the blinds of the Anderson estate. Grace was already awake, sitting on the edge of her bed, her packed bag at her feet. The resignation letter rested on top, sealed in a plain envelope. Her hands shook as she picked it up. Do it quickly, she told herself, before anyone else wakes, before your courage runs out. She crept quietly through the halls, past the silent kitchen, past the study where the faint scent of Emmanuel's cologne still lingered. At Mrs. Patel's office door, she slid the envelope beneath it. A strange ache filled her chest, as though she had just left behind a piece of herself. Her suitcase wheels rolled softly across the polished marble floor. As she approached the main door, the sky outside was washed with the first blush of sunrise. She inhaled deeply, whispering, "Goodbye." But before she could pull the handle, a voice behind her froze her in place. Going somewhere, Miss Oaken? Her breath caught. Slowly she turned. Emmanuel Anderson stood at the base of the staircase, his frame illuminated by the rising sun spilling through the high windows. He wasn't dressed in a suit, just a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his hair slightly mussed, as though he hadn't slept at all. In his hand, unmistakable, was her resignation letter. Grace's heart stopped. You read it. His jaw was set, but his gray eyes burned with an intensity she had never seen before. I read it, and I'm not accepting it. She swallowed hard, gripping the handle of her suitcase. It's for the best, sir. People are saying things, terrible things. They're calling me a gold digger. They're mocking you for defending me. I won't let my presence ruin your reputation." Emmanuel strode forward, each step deliberate, the letter crumpling slightly in his fist. "Do you think I care what they say?" "You should," Grace shot back, voice trembling. "Your business depends on your name. I'm nobody, just a maid who drew a silly picture. You can't—" "Enough." His voice cut through hers like a blade. The silence after was thick, broken only by the hum of the generator outside. Grace's eyes stung with tears. She looked down, unable to face him. "Please, just let me go quietly." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he exhaled sharply, almost as though he'd been holding his breath for years. "Grace," he said, her name rough on his tongue, "do you know what you've done to me?" Her head jerked up, startled. "You walked into this house clumsy and terrified," he continued, his voice low, fierce. "And in weeks you've turned it upside down. I used to think silence was strength, that walls of glass and rules of steel would protect me, but you—" His hands shook as he gestured to the hall, the kitchen, the framed drawing on the wall. "You filled this place with color, with noise, with life." Grace's lips parted, but no words came. His gaze burned into hers. "That sketch you gave me, it isn't silly. It's what I've wanted for years but never admitted. A home, not a mansion, not power. A home." His voice cracked, raw, unguarded. "And you made me believe it's possible." Tears spilled freely down Grace's cheeks. "You can't say these things just to make me stay. Don't pity me." "Pity?" His eyes flashed. He closed the last steps between them, his voice rough. "Grace, I'm confessing the one truth I've run from all my life. I need you. Not for pity, not for convenience. For me, for this house, for the man I don't want to be anymore." Her suitcase slipped from her fingers, thudding softly onto the floor. She pressed trembling hands to her face, trying to contain the storm of emotions flooding her. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you saw me," he said simply. "Not the billionaire, not the machine. You saw the boy who was afraid of the dark, and you stayed." Her sob escaped before she could stop it, and then his arms were around her, pulling her against his chest, steady and warm. She clung to him as though her heart might shatter if she let go. For a long time they stood there in the golden light of dawn, two broken people finding home in each other. By the following week, the mansion no longer resembled the cold fortress it had been. Emmanuel's decision was swift. The study was transformed into a reading room filled with shelves of children's books. Grace's idea, he had agreed without hesitation. Orphans from Hope Haven were invited every Saturday. The grand halls, once echoing with silence, now rang with laughter and tiny footsteps. Marcus baked cupcakes, Mrs. Patel supervised games, and Emmanuel, unrecognizable rolled sleeves, read stories aloud, his deep voice stumbling awkwardly through fairy tales that sent the children into fits of giggles. Grace stood in the doorway one afternoon, watching him with tears in her eyes. He caught her gaze, and for the first time in years, his smile was easy, unforced. At charity events, Emmanuel brought Grace openly, ignoring the gossip. Together they launched the Anderson Foundation, funding schools and orphanage expansions. Headlines that once mocked her now hailed them as Lagos's golden couple. Though to Grace, the real victory was simpler. Emmanuel laughed often now, and when he laughed, it was real. One evening, as the sun set over the lagoon, Emmanuel and Grace stood on the balcony, the city glittering beneath them. He took her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. "You almost left me," he said quietly, teasing but serious beneath it. "I thought I was protecting you," she murmured. "You were saving me," he corrected. He lifted her hand to his lips, brushing a kiss across her knuckles. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you were right to stay." Grace leaned into him, the city lights painting their silhouettes in gold. For the first time in years, Emmanuel Anderson wasn't afraid of the future. Because with Grace, he finally had what he'd been missing all along: a home. The night sky over Victoria Island shimmered with the promise of celebration. Strings of golden lights curled across the expansive lawn of the Anderson estate, now more alive than anyone could remember. Where once silence had reigned, laughter spilled in every direction. Children chasing balloons, music floating from a live band, and the scent of Marcus's famous roasted chicken mingling with yellow rice and champagne. Tonight was not just another gala. It was the official launch of the Anderson Ocon Foundation, a dream Emmanuel and Grace had turned into reality. The foundation promised scholarships, reading centers, and medical support for orphans and underprivileged children across Lagos. And unlike the cold, faceless donations Emmanuel once made in secrecy, this event was open, warm, overflowing with the community he had once kept at arm's length. Grace stood near the entrance in a simple yet elegant ivory gown, her curls pinned loosely, her smile radiant as she greeted arriving guests. Unlike a year ago, she no longer felt out of place in these glittering gatherings. She had become a part of Emmanuel's world, not by changing herself into something she wasn't, but by bringing light into the life of a man who had once sworn he didn't need it. "Grace," a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to find Mrs. Patel, dressed in a flowing indigo wrapper and pearls. Her usual sternness softened. "You've done it. This house." She glanced toward the hall where children were painting at easels Emmanuel had ordered set up for them. "It finally feels alive." Grace's chest swelled with emotion. "Not me, Mrs. Patel. Us. All of us. Emmanuel. He just needed to remember what it felt like to belong." Inside, Emmanuel Anderson was no longer the cold shadow who once frightened staff into silence. Tonight he mingled, shook hands, and even bent low to listen to a boy explaining his crayon drawing of a football match. When cameras flashed, he didn't stiffen or step away. Instead, he rested a hand on Grace's back, anchoring her beside him, letting the world see them together without shame or fear. On one wall of the grand hall, framed in a simple gold trim, hung the drawing that had started it all. Grace's clumsy sketch of a small house with glowing windows and children laughing outside. Guests paused to study it, some smiling, others moved. It didn't look like the work of a professional artist, but it radiated something stronger than skill: hope. When a reporter asked Emmanuel why he had chosen to display such a drawing so prominently in his mansion, he only said, "Because it's the most expensive thing I own. It cost me nothing, but it gave me everything." The words rippled across the hall, silencing chatter for a moment before applause swelled. Grace, standing nearby, flushed crimson, but her eyes glistened. Later that night, as the foundation's board members made speeches and children performed a cheerful dance routine, Grace slipped outside for air. The Lagos Lagoon stretched out in the distance, reflecting fireworks that had just begun to burst overhead. She hugged herself lightly, smiling as she watched the colors scatter across the night. Footsteps approached behind her. A hand, strong, steady, slipped into hers. Emmanuel's voice, lower than the music inside, brushed against her ear. "Hiding again?" Grace chuckled softly. "Not hiding, just taking it in. A year ago, this house was so quiet I could hear the tick of the clock in every room. And now," she gestured toward the glowing mansion behind them. "Now it's alive." He followed her gaze. Through the glass windows they could see children darting between tables, staff laughing, and even Marcus leading a mock cooking demonstration for a group of teenagers. The sight made Emmanuel's lips curve into a smile, rare once, but now more natural. "It's because of you," he said simply. Grace turned, startled. "Because of me?" "Yes." His eyes locked onto hers, gray but no longer cold, softer under the Lagos night. "Grace, this place, my life, would have stayed frozen if not for you. You brought light into these walls, laughter into a man who had forgotten how to laugh." He squeezed her hand tighter, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You made this house a home." Grace's throat tightened as tears blurred her view of the fireworks. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you gave me a place where I finally belong. For so long, it was just Mia and me. Now, it's us. All of us. The fireworks boomed overhead, scattering gold and silver across the sky. Emmanuel turned, cupping her cheek gently, tilting her face toward his. Do you see that? He nodded toward the colors bursting over the lagoon. Even the sky knows it's time to celebrate. Grace laughed through her tears, and then his lips brushed hers in a kiss that was both tender and certain. Around them, Lagos roared with life, the hum of traffic on the bridge, the distant music, the cheers from inside. But in that moment, all that mattered was the two of them. Hours later, when the last guests had left and the staff were tidying up, Emmanuel and Grace wandered into the new reading room together. The shelves were stacked with books, the walls decorated with children's drawings, and the faint scent of cookies lingered in the air. Grace paused in front of a particularly messy crayon drawing of a flower. Remind you of anything? Emmanuel teased, his eyes flicking toward her framed sketch in the hall. She swatted his arm playfully. Careful, sir. That sketch is priceless. He chuckled, a full, unrestrained laugh that echoed through the once cold halls. Then pulling her close, he whispered, So are you. Grace's heart swelled. She looked around the room, imagining the years ahead. More children filling these spaces, more laughter, more light. And beside her, always Emmanuel. When the fireworks ended and silence returned to Ikoyi, the Anderson estate no longer felt like a monument of glass and marble. It was a home, a place of love, warmth, and belonging. And under the soft glow of the final sparklers outside, Emmanuel Anderson whispered the words he had once been too afraid to believe. This house is finally a home. Because of you, Grace. Her smile bloomed like the first light of morning, steady and unshakable. Together, hand in hand, they stepped into the mansion, into the life they had built, no longer cold, no longer silent, but alive with the music of love.